I think everybody has gotten the message broadcast, but I'm going to quickly read it to refresh my own mind. And it's about Donald Trump's appointment of Secretary of State. I think it's really relevant. I think Donald Trump's making some very good appointments. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying about this Rex Tillerson fellow. Rex Tillerson, I think, is a genius. I think that Donald Trump is very smart, genius level, I don't know, but probably approaches that. His CIA director is probably one of my most favorite appointments that he's made. He's a Christian man, and as he was in Congress, I think it's Pomeo is his name. I may have that wrong with the literature. We have some standard. Pomeo openly professes his Christian faith, and as he was nominated by Donald Trump, he took the opportunity to say, and this is the CIA director, folks, this is an organization that has some black operations with some bad history, but we're kind of glad they're there. This fellow's going to be seeing a whole lot of things. This fellow made a statement, and what he said was, what the world needs is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm encouraged by some of Donald Trump's appointments. I'm a little agnostic on some of his perceived remedies, but my goodness, the thing that we would have had, and I'm going to show you a picture after I read this, of a, I didn't send it to you yet, Mike, and it kind of encapsulates the whole America's feeling, the voting electorate having dodged the bullet of Hillary Clinton, of Marxism and socialism continued. So, first of all, I'll get into that picture in just a minute. Let me read what this says to remind me of the message I want to give you tonight. Rex Tillerson, behind the curtain. Now this is Donald Trump's Secretary of State appointment, and he may have trouble getting approved through the Senate. The President-elect's choice for Secretary of State has some very interesting connections with Russia and abiotic oil. That's a non-fossil oil. Non-fossil oil is deep earth oil, and this whole message is going to have to do with that, and most folks who have heard me speak before know I talk about this a whole lot, because it's very important to what's happening on the world scene. Donald Trump is very smart and has made some good appointments. Come to caucus tonight and find out why Tillerson cannot wave a magic wand to fix this coming catastrophic event that will have 10 times the impact as the Deep Horizon oil spew. It's very important, my message tonight. The Deep Horizon in the Gulf, that oil spill, what they call spill, was actually a spew. Now, the only way to stop this event is by military force. There's an event that's coming. We've used our military to prop up the thing called the petrodollar in countries. And the military, the analogy is they are the blood sacrifice for the sin of our debt of this country. And I'm going to tie that in, because I think it's the most important thing we as Tea Party constitutional conservatives can talk about. The only way to stop this event is by military force. It has to do with the spewing of debt dollars that Congress, Democrats and Republicans, have allowed to spew over into the mission of our military. And that's going to be an important analogy to this message. Yes, this is why Tillerson was chosen over Romney. Romney would have been an open admission that we would have to deal with the collapse of the dollar. But Tillerson's appointment is an effort to prevent that debt catastrophe by achieving absolution from the debt dollars. The likely course is that we continue to try to achieve atonement to the blood sacrifice of our military by forcing nations to retain the dollar as their currency reserve. Yep, abiotic oil, non-fossil oil, can blow the lid off of the lie that oil is not plentiful. It is a lie that oil is plentiful. It is a lie that oil is not plentiful. So get my story straight. Russia, BP, British Petroleum, Exxon, Great Britain as a country, British Petroleum as a company in Britain, and the U.S. has known for years, but cheap oil, about abiotic oil, but cheap oil does not fund our debt problem. The high profits of oil-producing nations such as OPEC has for years been used to buy our treasury notes. This is changing. This is the pressure that is about to blow. Donald Trump understands perfectly and thinks Tillerson's relationship with Putin can fix it. Absolution as opposed to atonement. U.S. bankruptcy is the likely event that happens when both of these attempts fail. If you think of a more important topic for our caucus to consider, come tonight and let me know what it is. Apparently, there's not a more important topic because not too many folks came to tell me about it. Until then, I will continue to talk about my grandchildren's future. And that's what it's all about. And I'm glad one of my grandchildren's here tonight to hear Granddaddy talk about this, because it is about what kind of world we're going to turn over to them. Come out tonight to end the year with your eyes wide open, then you can start the new year being mission-minded and motivated with the Willow Run Tea Party caucus. There's two words there I want to focus on. Absolution and atonement. Well, absolution is actually a thing that you ask for. And usually a priest, you ask a priest, and usually he can give just for the asking. Atonement is something, and I think the absolution is sort of a good analogy that in our debt cycle that we have in this country, but absolution is not going to work because they don't have the authority to forgive us or to give us absolution. Now, atonement is a quite different thing. God can give atonement through a blood sacrifice of Jesus Christ as He sacrificed His Son on the cross, and we accept that gift. There's an atoning thing that happens there, a remission of the guilt of the sin that we've done. But absolution or atonement, when it comes to our debt sin as a country, is not available to us, even though we try to mimic God's love, and we try to, through the blood sacrifice of our military, and I always call it we mercenary our military, and send them to places, and we send them in silence. We allow our government to mercenary them and send them to rescue this thing called the petrodollar. Because we send them in silence and receive them in sorrow, that's what has to stop. The atonement cannot be given simply because young men and women die over there to prop up this debt dollar that is in place in this country. And our problem is that we will not deal with our debt. There's a lot of reasons that the debt is there. The national debt has achieved, I think, $20 trillion now. Over the years, it's not Republican or Democrat. Over the years, it's because of social spending, it's because of aid to countries, it's because of military spending, it's because of giving aid to other countries to protect them against other countries. But the only dog in the race that we have is that we send aid to Israel to protect Israel from the Arab nations, and then we send, our military-industrial complex will send aid to Saudi Arabia to protect them from Israel. And what the deal is here, in reality, what we're trying to protect is the OPEC nations, who in 1973, Henry Kissinger, by orders from Richard Nixon, went to Saudi Arabia and cut this deal called the petrodollar bargain. It's very important, and very important as to what's going on right now, even with Rex Tillerson, and I'm going to try to get into that. This bargain is this. For those of you online who's going to be watching this, haven't heard, the petro bargain was that we will give you, Henry Kissinger talks to Saudi Arabia, we will give you protection of your oil fields. At that time, Israel had just really cleaned everybody's clock over there, and they were having their sort of the whites of their eyes, their eyes wide open when they were looking over at Israel. And what we promised them was protection. Only if, this is the deal, only if you would purchase or sell oil in US dollars. In other words, when countries come to your oil fields and to your country to buy oil, you have to exchange your currency to US dollars in order for them to purchase that. Now, I've made an analogy before, and this is a good analogy. The temple coin is the same thing as the US dollar when it comes to the analogies of what's actually happening here. because you can't buy the oil without the approved currency and exchange of that currency. This is what made Jesus angry when he kicked over the tables in the temple, because he didn't like the exchange rate. It wasn't the money changers, it was the money exchangers. The people who were exchanging currencies, very different currencies from all over that region. People would come and they would have to buy an animal for blood sacrifice for their atonement. The analogy is all over here, and I don't have enough ability to make it really clear, but this is good stuff. Because we are mimicking God's plan. Jesus became the atonement. His blood sacrifice on the cross was God's eternal plan. God never made a plan for the United States to atone for their debt sin by the blood sacrifice of the American military. We bring them home different. We bring them home dead. And we send them in silence and receive them in sorrow. I'm done with silence. I'm not anti-war. I think there's time for a war. It needs to be congressionally, constitutionally declared, not a presidential executive order under the War Powers Act. That's why I say we need to be mission-minded and motivated. When people start coming back again in the near future to this caucus, we will have those missions. And I know our folks are motivated, because we have people like John Tomlinson come to this caucus, who is the Johnny of when Johnny comes marching home. The people who come home different, because we sent him in silence. We didn't understand about Iraq when we sent him there. It wasn't because he had weapons of mass destruction. I say this all the time. I'll get back to the Tillerson thing. But you have to understand why it's necessary that we prop up the petrodollar. The petrodollar was the salvation of our debt. It was the salvation of the thing that Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex can make no money on peace. We have to understand this. There's no money to be made in peace, with peace. And in medicine, there's no money in a cure. When we start talking about pharmaceuticals, we need to understand that. But right now, we're talking about why the petrodollar is in trouble, why countries all over the world are getting ready to dump the petrodollar, the currency reserve. And here's the key thing that you need to understand. You need to understand, and it's incumbent on me to say you need anything. I mean, it's presumptuous of me, but relative to this analogy, this speech I'm giving, you need to understand that the profits that these countries, OPEC nations, went with the same deal that Saudi Arabia did. They said, yes, we will sell oil in U.S. dollars only, and that we will make nations exchange their currency. They made big money on the exchange rate, sort of what happened with Caiaphas and the temple elders that did with the exchanging of that currency. They made big money on it. But the constructs of this agreement with Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations who came along later was that the profits they made from that, they would in turn purchase our debt. Now, if that is true, which it is true, you can do the research, I've done a lot of it, they would have to purchase our treasury bills. So we would sell other countries' treasury bills. The 10 OPEC nations would purchase our debt. That meant there is no consequence to runaway debt. And in real life, that can never be true. We all know that. I've been in debt trouble before, and I've sort of clawed my way out of it. I have gotten some relief through different procedures and things, but the thing I'm telling you is that runaway debt will consume the soul of a country, especially when you go for atonement after absolution has failed. You can't have no debt forgiveness, but you go for atonement through the blood sacrifice of the military. In other words, we send our military to keep these OPEC nations selling their oil in U.S. dollars when they want to dump the dollar. You'll see in the news that China wants to have the yuan or the renminbi as the world currency reserve. When this happens, folks, listen to me, this is important. This is why Tillerson was chosen and why Tillerson is going to be a good representative, and I hope he succeeds, but I don't think he will. I don't even think he gets past the Senate. But to keep this debt cycle funded, we cannot allow the OPEC nations to cancel the agreement that they purchase our debt. Because in doing that, by buying the treasury bills. Because in doing that, they dump those treasury bills that they're holding, what Saudi Arabia is threatening to do, back into our accountability of our Treasury Department. When that happens, folks, realize this. If that happens, the dollar collapses and we have bankruptcy. This is why Mitt Romney is a key player in the Secretary of State. This is why I think that Donald Trump called Mitt Romney in to talk to him. Mitt Romney is good at navigating through bankruptcies. It's why he is where he is. He would fix things in companies that were financially broke. So he really did do good things when he was in the private sector. But Donald Trump wanted Mitt Romney to come in case Rex Tillerson fails. And I think Rex Tillerson's not going to get through the Senate. And I think probably Mitt Romney will be the second choice. And that would be an open admission that we're heading toward dollar collapse. And if Mitt Romney is to take that place, that means that Rex Tillerson was either blocked by the Senate or he couldn't get done the things that I'm about to talk about. Now we're probably going to end this at about 10 o'clock and then Mike's going to show some videos. But the thing I want to talk about is the Russian oil company. Mike, I can't remember the name of it. Did I have it in the message broadcast? There's a Russian oil company that Tillerson tried to make a deal with when he was executive CEO of Exxon. And the sanctions that Obama put in place against Russia back in 2014 kind of blocked that deal. And that deal would have made an arrangement with the Russian-owned oil company. Russia owns, I think, 70% of this company. Communist nations do that. And Exxon Oil was going to have a deal. This was going to put BP, British Petroleum, Exxon Mobil, I think is the corporation, and Britain and the United States in alliance with an agreement that would bring the deep water drilling off the Gulf of Mexico. The abiotic oil that is under the Gulf of Mexico is bigger than the water, more than the water that is on top of the Gulf. And when you can hit abiotic oil at 40,000 feet, what you're doing, and if you let that information out, and this is what the deal is with Tillerson and Putin right now, show the map, if you can find that one. There's a map. You can't find it? It did. It was one of those three. And you'll have to scroll down through.
Those are the three I got.
Okay. Anyway, let me just, Michael, look for it. You can scroll down one of them and see. It has that map that I showed you. It's in the middle of the context. Russia needs a warm water port to transfer this oil, the abiotic oil they won't talk about, they won't, and we won't either. This oil is plentiful. And I always talk about, and the thing is, if everybody starts pumping this oil, then oil prices drive down. And if oil prices drive down, then these countries who are buying our U.S. debt with the profits don't have the profits to buy the debt. This is what's going the quandary we find ourselves in. This is why Tillerson's striking a deal with Russia to, and Putin is worthy and willing to strike this deal in partnership with America. That the abiotic oil, the plentiful oil, is sort of capped, and the production doesn't skyrocket. Yeah, you found it. And what Russia couldn't do without Tillerson and without this deal, Tillerson, the Secretary of State, is find a warm water port to allow their deep water or their deep drilling oil to find a warm water port through the Mediterranean Sea. Now, this goes all the way back to the first Afghanistan war, because this oil that Russia had discovered in the early 50s, and it goes all the way back to Hitler. Hitler was using abiotic oil, but he wouldn't talk about it. Russia couldn't go through Afghanistan with the pipelines because of Taliban and because of the cousins battling and fighting there. Russia tried to put pipelines on them, but it was against America's interest. America would not prosper if Russia could sell the oil in non-US dollars. Now that's what Afghanistan was about, pure and simple. That's why we made alliances with Al-Qaeda. That's why we gave them the Stinger missiles to defeat Russia. The pipelines would not go through Afghanistan. We accomplished that, but we got in bed with the enemy. We slept with the enemy in order to prop up the petrodollar, folks. And we're still doing it. Donald Trump may bring this to an end. We're going to come to a map here. Here it is. Russia, the whole thing about Syria is Russia has a military port in Syria. I think Syria is down here. Go down a little bit. Can you scroll? Yeah, right there. Lebanon. Russia has a warm water port there. They want to pipeline oil and gas over to there so it can get up to the Mediterranean region where it can get to warm water and get around to the countries that buy their oil, namely China. Why would Russia want to come through the Mediterranean Sea for China? China's a big consumer of oil, and they haven't learned yet that they can pump abiotic oil anywhere in the world, because abiotic oil is hydrocarbons, deep earth. You only have to learn how to build the bits that go deep. And when it's found out that you can get it anywhere in the world, the price of oil goes down. This is what we're trying to protect with Tillerson, so that this doesn't get out and Russia can keep the price of oil up. That's what this is all about. Keeping the price of oil up to fund our debt. We will not take care of the debt properly in this country. Now Russia, up in the Crimea region, up there just above the Black Sea, that's what the Crimea war was all about. They wanted, and they have it, a warm water port there that they could come through the Black Sea. But the problem is the Bosphorus ports down here where the city of Istanbul is. Now that's the Ottoman Empire. That's the Turks. Russia is a vowed enemy of the Ottoman Empire. They fight them all the time. So they do not have free passage through the Straits of Bosphorus there with their oil. So this was not a successful venture in Crimea to do this. So right now they're focusing on Syria. That's why America has an interest in getting rid of Assad in Syria, as far as what our old policies were, because that would block Russia from bringing that oil to the Mediterranean Sea, competing with the OPEC nations. Because see, those OPEC nations are still using their profits to purchase our debt instruments, our treasury bills. That's funding an irresponsible debt in this country. And that's where our real problem is the irresponsible debt that fuels bad policy. Russia won't buy our treasury bills by making countries use US dollars to purchase their oil. Russia sells their oil in rubles. Libya started selling their oils in another currency, a North African currency. Let me think about it. It wasn't US dollars. They dumped the US dollar. We went after Gaddafi. The number one reason that we wanted Gaddafi out was the same reason we want Assad out in Syria. Now Libya is over here. And the whole North African region, Libya was a conduit of oil. And they started selling their oil in something other than US dollars, which meant that the consumption of those barrels of oil by the whole country, other countries in the world, weren't needing to buy their oil from the OPEC nations who were selling their oil in US dollars and would buy our debt. You keep hearing me refer to the fact of our debt being purchased by the profits from oil that countries have made other countries buy in US dollars. That's the whole thing, what's going on right now. We need to know that the policy of this. I'm not against sending our military for American interest, but I am for deceiving the American people about why we send them. This map in Lebanon will be the last point I want to make with this map. Right now, we have armed very bad people in Libya to get rid of Gaddafi. Obama and Hillary Clinton, that's what Benghazi was about. A few months back, a year or so, I said there was going to be 3 important things that we talk about in this caucus. It is Benghazi, Benghazi, and Benghazi. Now, in that little verbal analogy there lies some real truth. Because Benghazi was a very bad deal that America allowed to happen, our leadership in America, through Hillary Clinton. She allowed this to happen. Because we wanted to get rid of Gaddafi, we sent in weapons of the people who wanted to overthrow Gaddafi. The reason we wanted to overthrow Gaddafi is because he dumped the US dollar as his currency reserve. That's like shooting a nuclear weapon at us. We intercepted it, it didn't blow up, but we killed him. Our policy armed people who became ISIS. This is the thing. The weapons that we sent to Libya to overthrow Gaddafi were then transported through Benghazi and our consulate and our State Department through Benghazi, and they were to go to Turkey en route to where? Syria. This is very provable and has been proven. We were going to arm the rebels who were going to take out Assad in Syria, because Assad also, with Russia, has conspired to allow oil to be pumped, sold, and delivered without using US dollars for the transaction. Like I could use some. And this is what our whole foreign policy is about. Now, this notion to keep countries pumping their oil and selling it in US dollars is the thing that we will be continuing to talk about in this caucus, because I think it forms policy by Democrats and Republicans. There needs to be this understanding that there is not a more important thing that we could work on. We accept a mission and we're minded toward that mission, and we need to focus on it. The nature of why this is important is the word abiotic. Might go to one that explains abiotic oil. Abiotic oil, it's a different is deep earth oil. It is plentiful. See, I think I just went over I want the top one. Now, there's a video in here somewhere, but we're not going to show the video now. Well, let's just read the headlines. Okay. They say primary water is also very well sourced, and we're not going to run out of it. But go down here. What if everything you thought and you knew about the nature of energy and natural resources was an elaborate lie concocted to manipulate and control the economy and human behavior? Go on down. Oil reserves are currently being used up much more quickly than they're being replenished. So if this theory is true, the abiotic theory, humanity urgently needs to invest in other forms of energy production. This is what they're telling us. They're telling us that we have peak oil, we're going to use up all the oil. Abiotic oil production means oil availability is virtually limitless, utilizing proper technologies just as deep. Russia has this. The spill that we had in the Gulf of Mexico wasn't a spill, it was a spew. They went some 40,000 feet deep. Fossil fuels has never been found, or fossils have never been found deeper than 13,000 feet. So we're drilling deep down, and they're getting this abiotic oil everywhere. Here's the analogy. I'm going to tell a joke. A man dies. He's worked all of his life. He's got a bag of gold, and he dies with the gold in his hand. And it's a bag of gold. He goes to, this is not biblically correct, but it goes to the point. He goes to St. Peter, and St. Peter says, "What you got in the bag?" He says, "Well, I've got a bag of gold, and I'd like to take it with me." St. Peter says, "No, it's not going to work. That's not what gets you into heaven." "Well, I've been saved, and I understand what gets me into heaven, but can we just make this one exception that I take this gold into heaven with me?" Now, St. Peter wouldn't do this, but he did for the sake of this analogy. He said, "Okay, go ahead." So this old fella, he's walking down the road in heaven, and someone's coming toward him. And some soul and saint there has a question for him as he's holding that bag over his shoulders and he's laboring walking down. And the fellow asks him, he says, "Fellow, what is laboring you so much? What are you holding in that bag?" And he said, "Oh man, I've worked my entire life for this. Look at what I got." And he opened it up and he said, "It's gold." And the old fellow said, "What are you doing carrying around pavement?" Now, the streets of gold are paved with, or the streets of heaven are paved with gold. This gives a little bit of analogy. When you have a lot of anything, the value isn't there anymore. The reason gold is so expensive is because there's little of it. If you have a lot of oil, if it is in fact abiotic, it's not high priced and high valued anymore. If any nation can find out the technology of drilling down and getting it, then these OPEC nations, who had made the deal back with Kissinger on the petrodollar, who would fund our debt by purchasing our treasury bills, no longer have to do that because the price of oil is down around $50 a barrel, where it was up when we were thinking about peak oil and running out of oil. It was up around $120 a barrel. There's no money in the remedy when it comes to peak oil. If oil is abiotic and available everywhere, we're going to have a dollar collapse. People don't think that's relevant, but there's a lot of economic people who do, and I think Donald Trump understands it. He doesn't talk about it, and I think that's why Romney is Tillerson's backup. Because if Tillerson doesn't get into a position where he can work these deals worldwide to not only pump abiotic oil, but keep it from becoming so plentiful in the market that it drives the price of oil down. And this is what the effort is. They have to keep the price of oil up, yet still producing enough to fund the economies in America and in Russia and in Great Britain. Now, what I think happens is the great calamity of the Middle East will happen. Because I don't think Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations can continue to compete with the production of OPEC or abiotic oil that Russia, through this agreement with Tillerson, is going to have. And there is an Arctic Sea discovery too, by the way, in the Arctic Sea that has more oil in it through this deep water drilling, deep earth drilling, than Saudi Arabia has had in the entirety of its existence. There's more oil that has been discovered than all of oil in all the countries today. If that gets discovered, the price of oil goes down. And I think we're living a lie when it comes to propping up the petrodollar. I don't want to live a lie. I don't want to mercenary military. I don't want to have a blood sacrifice in order to find atonement for our debt sin of our military. It's fake, it's false, it's not of God. God has a plan to take care of your runaway spending. I think of the gleaners in the Bible. God has a plan of people who need. The people who produce would leave a certain portion of their field for people who need. It wasn't a government program, it wasn't a government handout. This is what we have to understand as Christian constitutional conservatives. And we need to understand that there are needs out there, and we need to take care of those needs. But God never took care of anyone's need by putting a gun to their rib and taking from a person in order to give to somebody who had needs. God would make a way for those needs, and God would lay it on the heart of someone to give to those needs, such as the Gleaner program. Now, I understand it's more complicated. I understand there's a lot of reasons that we have $20 trillion in debt, but that is our debt sin. There is no atonement for that sin. And having our military sacrificing their blood and their lives and their families and their lives to be lived to prop up a debt dollar, a petrodollar, is, I think, the worst path that we can take in this country. Because it has me turn over to my grandchildren a flawed policy that goes forth that they're going to have to live under. God's gracious, and His grace has been extended to this country, but how long? How long? Mike, I want to show, and then I'm going to leave, and then you can show some videos. Because I got family and work, and we'll show the videos to get them on the YouTube. This is a picture that I talked about before, and it sort of says it all about how the voting electorate felt about Hillary Clinton. Now, the reason the election becomes important to this message is because God intervened. And I'm saying, my belief is God intervened when America repudiated Hillary Clinton. Because now there's a thing that can happen that was not going to be the continuance of mercenarying our military. I think Donald Trump is going to get it right, but I don't know that it can work. But he's not going to continue to use our military to build nations so that they're friendly to our debt situation. Okay, I'm going to be just a minute, but this is going to be good. You're going to like it. It's just a picture. Okay, I can send this to you. This is going to go to Hotmail. Can you get that? Oh, Mike, I don't know. Okay. It should come. Now, Mike is going to show you this picture. And this fellow that's sitting next to Hillary Clinton, what I think is a good analogy of what actually happened with the voting electorate when they got a dose of Hillary Clinton, and the reaction to this fellow's face is what the repudiation, I think, that America had toward Hillary Clinton. Now, this guy is sitting there, and he finds out who she really is. This is the voting electorate right here, this fellow in the white shirt. Hillary's trying to get friendly with him, even putting her hand on his leg. But the problem is, look at his reaction to who he finds out Hillary actually is. And I think that's what happened in our election. I think that's what happened. Hillary Clinton was repudiated by people who are finally starting to get the picture. And that expression on his face is what happened in our election. Now, Donald Trump was able to take advantage of that, and that's wonderful. And I think Donald Trump's making some good appointments, and I think that we have a shot at taking care of this debt problem. He's bringing companies back into this country. He's bringing jobs. He's making good decisions. He's making good appointments. This Rex Tillerson thing, the jury's out as to whether or not he can actually do what Donald Trump and Putin are trying to get accomplished by putting him as Secretary of State. If the Senate allows it, I still think we have trouble. But should the Senate not ratify him, advising consent, I think then Mitt Romney comes in and prepares for the impact. Because that's what Mitt Romney does. He navigates through bankruptcy. And should this Rex Tillerson effort with Putin and abiotic oil, should it fail, then I think our country has some very serious issues with the dollar collapse and bankruptcy. And this is why I think it's important for us, and those of you who are hearing this on the YouTube, it's important for you to consider the fact, the notion, that this could be another Great Depression. If Rex Tillerson isn't successful, don't think he will be. And so the thing that we need to do first is call on God for forgiveness, personally, and then as a nation, try to institute the things that would be God's choice in our debt program, which would mean don't steal and give money that you stole to people who government decides needs it more than you do. I think the tax program in this country is illicit and unlawful. I think Donald Trump will correct a lot of that. But when we get to the good policies, I think we get to remedy. And the remedy since 1973 has not been the petrodollar bargain that Kissinger signed up for. It just has never worked well. It has only funded unresponsible debt, and there is no consequence to bad spending in this country by Republicans and Democrats. And the consequence falls on the young people who will take this country when we pass on. And that is my grandchildren. And they will know that their grandfather stood for something that he believed in, that he could give them a better life and a better country by affecting policies that this government has put forward. And maybe someday they won't be called as in the military as a mercenary to go and prop up a petrodollar when there's been other remedies that can take care of it. Well, I hope I have been not elusive, but elusive in my theory and thought in trying to get these things across. Sometimes I'm not that good at it, but I got to tell you, I am very motivated to get this message out, because I think the policies in Washington, the swamp that Donald Trump wants to drain, it is that swamp that it compromises the congressman to give votes, to give a superficial remedy to this debt problem. When they get there, they understand they have to do it. They become what we call neocons. Hillary was a neocon. She voted to go to war in Iraq, not because he had weapons of mass destruction. We knew he had weapons of mass destruction. They didn't want to find them. Saddam Hussein dumped the dollar as the currency reserve, and we fixed that with the military. And we continue to do it in Libya, and right now trying to do it in Libya. But this Rex Tillerson thing, maybe he can fix it with Putin, and without having to use our military to go in there and fight even Russia. Because we would be fighting Russia to overthrow Assad in Syria. Maybe we don't have to do that. Maybe we don't have to mercenary the military and have Johnnies come marching home, indifferent and dead, because we had to get rid of Assad. Russia does not have to be our geopolitical enemy. But as it stands right now, Mitt Romney was right about that. So I'm going to close for now. Mike will show a few videos. If you choose to watch them, that's great. I think we're going to put them on the, I think I want the how the petrodollar trade works. And yeah, and I don't know if the others are actually videos. But thanks for paying attention. Those of you who will be hearing this, our audience sometimes is very wide. I know our online message goes out to about 300 people. So the message is important. I appreciate your time, the time of the year and the holidays and the competition we have with football tonight is understandable, but I'm glad we didn't cancel tonight. So thank you for putting up with the messenger, but please take serious the message. Good night, folks.